Hello NBA fans and welcome back to another video here on the NBA the week that was. It's been a while, almost 2 weeks, but I'm back and here to analyze the first round of the 2019-2020 NBA playoffs that are being played in the Orlando bubble. There were some great series, some sweeps, some really close ones, and we'll be going into all of those today. So without further ado, let's get right into the first series. Let's start off in the Eastern Conference. The first series I'll be analyzing was between the first-seeded Milwaukee Bucks and the 8th-seeded Orlando Magic. This series ended 4-1 in the Bucks' favor, just as I predicted. I actually predicted a sweep, but I knew that the Bucks would win either way. In the first game, Nikola Vucevic went crazy and had great support from his supporting cast, including Markelle Fultz, Evan Fournier, and they managed to beat the Bucks in Game 1, shocking the world. However, everyone knew that Giannis and co would not be stopped by Nikola Vucevic and a very injured Magic team that didn't include key players like Aaron Gordon or Mohamed Bamba. So it was a blowout. Giannis went crazy the whole series. Middleton had some good games, had some bad games. He started off the series horribly, but picked it up as time went on. And overall, it didn't take too much effort from the Bucks to dismantle this Magic team using their three-point menacing, the menacing three-point lineup they have with Korver, Middleton, DiVincenzo, Brook Lopez, all the shooters they have with Giannis driving in. The Bucks offense went great, and they managed to lock up Vucevic, who despite being the focus of the Magic offense, still played some really great games. However, it was a great series win for the Bucks, who moved on 4-1. The next series I'll be analyzing was between the 2-seeded Toronto Raptors and the 7-seeded Brooklyn Nets. I think everyone knew what was going to happen in the series. The Toronto Raptors ended up sweeping the Brooklyn Nets 7-0 and absolutely dismantled them. I mean, it was pretty obvious that the Nets really didn't have a chance. Some of their key players, honestly their best players, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Spencer Dinwiddie, DeAndre Jordan, all were out of the bubble and weren't playing. So the Nets were forced to rely on 10-day contract players, and Karis LeVert, who surprisingly stepped it up, really proved himself and he'll be a great third option for Brooklyn. He really proved himself as a playmaker. Everyone knew he could score, but no one knew he could pass as well as he did in the bubble. So I'm excited to see this Nets team in the future. Will they really be able to contend against teams like the Heat, the Bucks, the Raptors, the Celtics? It'll be quite interesting to see next year. However, this year the Raptors, they just had fun with the Nets. In Game 4, the Raptors bench scored 100 points. It was crazy to think about. They ended up scoring 150 points that game. Players like Serge Ibaka, Norman Powell, Chris Boucher, Terrence Davis, all stepping it up off the bench and easily dismantling this Nets team 4-0. The next series I'll be analyzing is again in the Eastern Conference, and it is between the 3-seeded Boston Celtics and the 6-seeded Philadelphia 76ers. Honestly, I didn't expect the outcome of this series. The Celtics ended up sweeping the Philadelphia 76ers 4-0. Even though the Sixers were without Ben Simmons, who again is arguably their second best player, really the Sixers should have won one game. They have two max level players in Tobias Harris and Al Horford, who really proved why they weren't deserving of this contract. Honestly, it was like this cardio practice for them. They weren't doing anything on offense, anything on defense. Tobias Harris hasn't been the same since, I think he had a great half season with the Clippers last year when the Sixers traded for him, and Al Horford has been a great player in his career, but he's 34 years old, and it really comes to show how the Sixers front office really overpaid both of these guys, and they aren't even complimentary of their star Joel Embiid's game. If it were a guy like Buddy Hield who can actually shoot the ball, or more shooters around Embiid, it would have made sense. But Tobias Harris' best strength is his mid-range shot and his slashing ability, and Al Horford is best as a playmaking big with the ball. He sets up the play. He doesn't really complement Embiid because he lacks that shooting touch that he once had back in his days in Atlanta and Boston. However, still, I really think the Sixers could have pulled out a game or two because of the lack of depth that the Celtics have in the big man position. They lost Al Horford again in free agency this year, so they were running a big man rotation of Enes Kanter and Robert Williams, and that really isn't a good defensive front court. I mean, Robert Williams has great potential. He's won ACC Defensive Player of the Year twice in college. However, he's still a raw prospect. In a few years, he'll really be a great defensive player. But Enes Kanter, who is the more proven center of the two, is an offensive-minded guy, one of the best offensive rebounders in the game, but can't play defense for his life. Has no footwork, no awareness. He's not a good defensive center. So Embiid, who is an all-star center, arguably the best center in the league, should have run riot on both of these guys. However, Embiid, again, isn't showing enough effort. He shows effort in bits and pieces. However, your star needs to always be there, always be present, like Kawhi Leonard, always going hard at it in the playoffs. LeBron, all of these stars, they're really always playing with 100% effort. Embiid just doesn't seem to do that. There's just a lack of motivation in him, which I think will only come if he has a better supporting cast that supports his game. You know, if he's giving it all, like his all for a half, and his teammates aren't doing anything, any normal person would be unmotivated, you know. And I mean, Embiid as a leader should be pushing his guys to play better. However, he didn't do that. But it wasn't just the 76ers' bad play that made them lose this series. The Celtics, man, they're a great team. The depth they possess on the wing, they're four-headed scoring monster, which unfortunately in the second round is down to 3 due to Gordon Hayward's injury. But Kemba Walker, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward, they could all give you 20 to 25 points on any night, and they kept going at it. However, it wasn't just those four with the Boston Celtics. People like Brad Wanamaker off the bench, Grant Williams off the bench, Marcus Smart as a starter, they all stepped up, which is something that the 76ers team didn't do, even though they have the talent on that team. As I said, Tobias Harris, Al Horford, Matisse Thybulle, Furkan Korkmaz, none of these guys really stepped it up and supported Embiid, unlike the Celtics, who supported their stars in Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker. Guys like, as I said, Marcus Smart, going hard on both ends, being the best defender for the Celtics in that series, and really pushing the Celtics to sweep the series and get it over with as soon as possible. It was a great series to watch with some close games, but the Celtics really dominated the 76ers. The final series I'll be analyzing was between the 4th seeded Miami Heat and the 5th seeded Indiana Pacers. This series again ended in the sweep, making the Bucks and Magic series the only series that didn't end up in a sweep. The Heat ended up winning 4-0, and again, just like the Celtics and the Raptors, dominated their opposition, which in this case was the Indiana Pacers. Again, the Pacers were hurt by injuries like the Nets and the Sixers were, but still, a sweep. I mean, the Pacers still have talent without Domantas Sabonis on the floor. Sabonis was out due to a foot injury, but they still had Malcolm Brogdon, Miles Turner, TJ Warren, who had arguably been one of the best players in the bubble, as well as Victor Oladipo, who had finally come back from injury. However, the Heat really just dominated the Pacers. The Heat have a great combination of playmaking and size. They don't have too much size actually, but they have a great shooting and playmaking roster that really steps it up on the defensive end as well. The shooters include Duncan Robinson, who's one of my favorite players in the NBA these days. He's arguably the best shooter without Stephen Clay playing, and his ability to go off the ball, set screens, and really get in the best positions to shoot the three is great to watch, and his stroke is just beautiful. He always shoots 40 to 50% in games, which is great to watch, almost 8 or 9 threes. Guys like Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo is a first-year All-Star, Jimmy Butler, of course, the leader of this team. Really, they all just played together as a team. I don't recall any standout performances in any of the games. However, it was a complete team effort, and every role player was playing their role to perfection. Whether it be Derrick Jones Jr. being that slashing guy off the bench to grab rebounds and use his athleticism. Goran Dragic being that veteran spark off the bench, being that playmaking and scoring point guard. Tyler Hero being that scoring specialist as a rookie off the bench. Bam Adebayo being that all-around player. They all played those roles to perfection in dismantling the Pacers. The Pacers, they ended up firing their coach after the series because he simply got outcoached by Eric Spoelstra. There were some moments where the Pacers would catch up, but Spoelstra was quick to make adjustments to counter the player that's playing really well for the Pacers, like Malcolm Brogdon, really stepped it up on games. But Spoelstra, he laid out a perfect defensive strategy to stop Brogdon, which, again, Nate McMillan didn't know how to handle, which proved that he's a great person leader. He really brought hustle into this Pacers team, and really, for a Pacers team in a small market, they played really well, making the 4th seed for the past 3 or 4 years under McMillan. However, it just wasn't enough. He's a defensive coach but lacks the offensive capabilities as a coach to really coach his team against a guy who's a veteran like Spoelstra, one of the best coaches in the league at the moment. Malcolm Brogdon did step it up for the Pacers. However, Victor Oladipo isn't looking like his old 2018-2019 All-NBA self, which is a worrying sign for the Indiana Pacers. And Miles Turner, again, not really. Again, he has his moments. Oladipo had his moment in the series. Warren had his moment throughout all the seeding games. However, it wasn't enough for this Pacers team, who really lacks that star and really missed Sabonis in this series. Now, let's move over to the conference that had the more entertaining series, the Western Conference. The first series I'll be analyzing was between the first-seeded Los Angeles Lakers and the 8th-seeded Portland Trail Blazers. The Trailblazers ended up winning the play-in game against the Grizzlies in a very close game to end up getting a matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers. Portland surprised the world. Well, not really surprised, with the way they were playing in the bubble. People really expected the Trailblazers to give the Lakers a challenge, and they proved that by winning Game 1. The Lakers just didn't look up to the challenge of stopping guys like Lillard, McCollum, even Melo, really stepping it up, and Anthony Davis and LeBron just weren't doing anything to really, and their supporting cast, the Lakers couldn't hit a 3 in that game, and I think across the whole series, the Lakers didn't shoot too well from 3, but it really didn't matter. The Lakers ended up winning 4-1, and the Blazers really, it was like a, you knew the Cinderella story was coming to an end. Lillard unfortunately got injured in Game 4 as well, and he was out for Game 4 and Game 5. And it really just went downhill from for the Blazers after winning Game 1. LeBron dominated in Game 2. Anthony Davis stepped it up. And the supporting cast finally, some of them stepped up. Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Danny Green couldn't hit a 3 for his life. But the Lakers had players stepping up when they needed to. And the Trailblazers, without Lillard in Game 4 or 5, they gave their best. Melo looked like vintage Melo. Redemption Melo, as they've been calling him. CJ McCollum trying his best. But again, it wasn't enough. The Trailblazers team, regardless of how talented their offense is, with Nurkic, Melo, McCollum, Lillard, Gary Trent Jr., their defense really lacked. And then guys like Gary Trent Jr., who'd been playing so well in the bubble, got gassed on the defensive end, trying to stop guys like LeBron James, the second best player of all time. And it just wasn't enough for the Blazers on the defensive end. And while they give their best on offense, as I said, the Lakers ran riot on them on offense as well. And they obviously are one of the best defenses in the league and ended up winning this series 4-1. The series between the 2nd-seeded Los Angeles Clippers and the 7th-seeded Dallas Mavericks has been one of the best playoff series I've seen in a while, and one of the best playoff series in the bubble. The Clippers ended up winning 4-2, however, it felt like an injustice that the Mavs didn't win. Game 1 felt really biased against the Mavericks. Kristaps Porzingis got unfairly ejected for not even doing too much. His 2 technicals seemed very soft, and it really brings into question how the technical rules are getting softer and softer from the 90s, where people could go and push each other around and only get a flagrant 1 foul, not even get ejected. And the refs seemed very biased against the Clippers, but regardless, the Clippers ended up winning Game 1. However, the Mavericks came storming back in Game 2 and beat the Clippers by 13 points. However, it was very unfortunate when Kristaps Porzingis got injured, and it was discovered that he had torn his meniscus, which ruled him out for the rest of the series. Based off that, the Clippers really could, exploit the advantage they had in the small ball lineup. Because of the Clippers' advantage in the small ball, Kristaps Porzingis would always have an advantage because they would be forced to play Zubac, and that isn't the best lineup for the Clippers. However, with Porzingis out, they could use their lineup of Kawhi, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Marcus Morris, and Paul George, and really just be a brilliant team. That lineup is great and arguably the best lineup in the NBA at the moment. However, Game 3, the Clippers again used the advantage of Porzingis being out and beat the Mavericks. However, Game 4, oh my god. In Game 3, Luka Doncic got injured and sprained his ankle. However, in Game 4, he was playing on a half-strength ankle. He came in, scored 47 points, had a triple-double, and hit the game winner from almost half court to win the game in overtime. It was one of the best moments I've seen in the NBA in the past 10 years, in the years I've been watching the NBA. Watching that live was so amazing. Him hitting that three and his teammates rushing the court. It was just an exhilarating moment for fans around the world, and it ended up having the Clippers and Mavericks tied at 2-2. However, the Clippers ended up winning the next two games. I mean, the Mavericks were gassed. They didn't have the talent they needed. If Porzingis was there, it would have been another story. But Luka tried his best. But again, he was playing on a weak ankle. He was getting targeted by Marcus Morris, which I think the league should have taken a look at. And I think he ended up getting fined $25,000. However, it felt unfair that the Mavericks didn't win, to be honest. But again, the Clippers really played well. Kawhi Leonard was a monster, not scoring less than 29 points across 6 games, averaging around 33 points, just playing like an absolute beast, really trying to prove himself as the best player in the NBA. And the Clippers ended up winning this great series 4-2. The next series I'll be analyzing was arguably the best series of the bubble. It was a 7-game series between the 3-seeded Denver Nuggets and the 6-seeded Utah Jazz, and the Nuggets prevailed in Game 7, 80-78 in the last game. It was such a great game to watch, both teams going at it. But however, this whole series was defined by a duel between Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell. Both these guys went absolutely crazy. In Game 1, Jamal Murray had around 40 points, but Donovan Mitchell had 57 points, yet the Jazz still lost in overtime. It was crazy to think about that Donovan Mitchell had the 3rd highest scoring playoff performance of all time, only 5 points below Michael Jordan's record of 62 points back in that series against the Celtics in his first playoff series. However, Mitchell went crazy Game 1 and they still ended up losing. Yet the Jazz came back full force, won the next game, and they kept going back and forth, and eventually the Jazz ended up going up 3-1 after winning Game 4, with the Nuggets unable to stop Donovan Mitchell. From Game 5 to Game 7, you could really tell that Jamal Murray was there to prove a point. He did not want to lose this playoff series. The Nuggets, they really seem like a championship team, but haven't really lived up to that potential in the playoffs. However, he really didn't want to lose this series, and you could tell. That guy was averaging 42 points. In a 3-game stretch, Jamal Murray scored 42 points, 50 points in Game 5, and 42 points in Game 6 to make it a Game 7 in that series. Oh my god, watching him go off against Donovan Mitchell, who was averaging around 35 points as well, was great to watch. Jamal Murray just couldn't miss, whether it be a 3, a step back mid-range, a 360 layup, which he ended up scoring. The man could not be stopped. However, in Game 7, you could tell he was obviously gassed. He finally got his support from Nikola Jokic, his all-star teammate, who had 30 points and the game-winning shot in that Game 7 against the Jazz, and ended up winning 80-78 and winning the series 4-3. However, this series was defined by that duel between Murray and Mitchell, and it will be one of the best one-on-one performances we've seen in a series in a long time. The last series I'll be analyzing was, again, one of my favorite series in the bubble. It was a 7-game series between the 4-seeded Houston Rockets and the 5-seeded Oklahoma City Thunder, in which the Rockets ended up prevailing 4-3. It was really interesting. There were many key points in this matchup to watch out for. It was Westbrook and Chris Paul playing against their old teams. Dort, an undrafted rookie, really clamping Harden, playing some of the best defense we've ever seen anyone play against James Harden, and really trying his best. But in Game 7, of course, the Rockets, with their small ball lineup, really prevailed, and they were up 3-2. However, Chris Paul, man, that guy did so well to bring the Thunder to this position. Without Chris Paul, they would not be here. But that 3-guard lineup of Schroeder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Chris Paul really ran riot across NBA teams this year. However, in this series, it wasn't enough, and the Rockets ended up prevailing in 7 games. But again, there were many key points. As I said, the duel between James Harden and Dort. Dort, in fact, they were tempting him to shoot because that guy could not make a 3 for his life. He was like Andre Robertson, a great defender, but cannot shoot the 3-point shot. However, in Game 7, they played that same strategy, and Dort ended up getting 30 points. It was crazy to watch. Everyone was on Twitter like, Game 7 Dort. We were like, the Thunder are going to win. This team that had a 0.5% chance of making the playoffs was really about to upset the Rockets, who have championship aspirations. However, Chris Paul and company could not stop Harden, Westbrook, PJ Tucker, Robert Covington, their small ball lineup. Despite the Rockets being known for their offense, it was their defense that was defining in this series and what really helped them win the series. They have the best defensive rating in the bubble, in the playoffs, and they just defended as a unit, helping each other out whenever a guy runs in towards the rim, always doubling Chris Paul whenever they need, closing out on three-point shots with speed and velocity, and really just playing the best defense the Rockets have ever played as a unit, which really ended up helping them win the series in 7 games. And with that, I would like to wrap up this first round analysis here on the NBA The Week That Was. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like down below, and if you're new on this channel, subscribe as well. Comment down below if you expected any of the outcomes of the series, whether it was the sweep by the Celtics or the 7-game series between the Rockets and the Thunder. Let me know in the comments down below. Be on the lookout for the second round analysis when all those series wrap up. I'll catch you guys on the next episode here on the NBA The Week That Was. See ya!